On August 25, 1896, Sultan Hamid bin Thuwaini of Zanzibar died suddenly. Many suspected poisoning, possibly orchestrated by his cousin, Khalid bin Bargash. Khalid immediately occupied the Sultan's palace complex without British approval, violating a treaty signed in 1886. The treaty stipulated that any new sultan required British consent for accession. The local British diplomat Basil Cave and Rear Admiral Harry Rawson issued an ultimatum. They demanded Khalid lower his flag, leave the palace, and disperse his forces by 9 o'clock in the morning on August 27, 1896. Khalid bin Bargash ignored the warning. He bolstered his palace guard to roughly 2,800 men, armed with old cannons and Maxim machine guns. He even armed the Sultan's modest royal yacht, the HHS Glasgow. Facing Khalid's forces were 5 Royal Navy vessels anchored in the harbor: HMS Philomel, HMS St. George, HMS Thrush, HMS Sparrow, and HMS Raccoon. On land, the British commanded approximately 900 loyal Zanzibari soldiers, known as Askaris, led by Brigadier General Lloyd Matthews. As the deadline approached, Khalid sent an envoy requesting a parley, but Cave replied that he would only negotiate if Khalid agreed to the terms. Khalid responded defiantly, believing the British would not actually open fire. At precisely 9 o'clock on the morning of August 27, 1896, the ultimatum expired. 2 minutes later, at 9:02 a.m., Rear Admiral Rawson gave the order to commence bombardment. The Royal Navy ships unleashed a devastating barrage upon the wooden palace structure. The antiquated Zanzibari artillery pieces were quickly silenced. Within minutes, the main palace buildings were engulfed in flames and collapsing. The HHS Glasgow attempted to fire on HMS St. George, but was swiftly sunk by return fire from the British cruiser. By approximately 9:40 a.m., the palace flag had been shot down. With his defenses obliterated and substantial casualties mounting among his followers, Khalid bin Bargash fled the palace. He sought refuge in the German consulate. Fighting ceased shortly thereafter, around 9:45 a.m. The entire conflict had lasted between 38 and 45 minutes, making it the shortest recorded war in history. Reports indicated around 500 of Khalid's defenders were killed or wounded during the brief engagement. British casualties were minimal, with only one petty officer aboard HMS Thrush sustaining minor injuries. Subsequently, the British quickly installed their preferred candidate, Sultan Hamid bin Mohammed, onto the throne. His rule ushered in a period of significantly increased British influence over Zanzibar. Khalid bin Bargash remained in the German consulate before being smuggled out to German East Africa. He was eventually captured by British forces during the East African campaign of World War I in 1916 and later exiled. Following the cessation of hostilities on August 27, 1896, the British assessed the damage. The palace complex suffered extensive destruction from the naval bombardment. The British government demanded reparations from the Zanzibari government to cover the cost of the shells fired and the damages incurred. This sum amounted to approximately 300,000 rupees. Sultan Hamid bin Mohammed's ascension marked the beginning of the end for Zanzibar's autonomy. Although technically ruling, his powers were heavily curtailed by British advisors. One significant development during Hamid's reign, heavily influenced by British pressure, occurred in 1897. He formally abolished the legal status of slavery in Zanzibar, a major step, though enforcement took time. The wreck of the HHS Glasgow remained partially submerged in the harbor for some time. It served as a stark reminder of the brief but decisive conflict. Meanwhile, Khalid bin Bargash lived under German protection in Dar es Salaam, located in German East Africa. His presence remained a point of minor contention between Britain and Germany. During World War I, British forces captured German East Africa. Khalid bin Bargash was apprehended in 1916. The British authorities exiled him, first to St. Helena, the same island where Napoleon Bonaparte had been exiled over a century earlier. Later, he was moved to the Seychelles. Khalid bin Bargash eventually died in Mombasa in 1927, never returning to Zanzibar. The Anglo-Zanzibar War, lasting less than an hour, stood as a potent demonstration of overwhelming imperial military force against a less technologically advanced opponent. It decisively cemented British control over the strategically important island nation. Rear Admiral Harry Rawson, who commanded the naval bombardment, was later appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Channel Fleet. Basil Cave, the British consul, was made a Companion of the Order of the Bath for his actions during the crisis. Brigadier General Lloyd Matthews, leader of the loyal Zanzibari troops, continued serving in Zanzibar until his death in 1901. His role was crucial in consolidating British control on the ground. The swiftness and decisiveness of the conflict were noted in Britain and across Europe. It underscored the power imbalance inherent in late 19th century colonial encounters. During this period, British influence in East Africa was rapidly expanding. The suppression of Khalid's challenge reinforced Britain's dominance in the region, particularly concerning trade routes and strategic coastal access. Under Sultan Hamid and his successors, Zanzibar effectively became a British protectorate. Key decisions regarding finance, foreign policy, and internal administration required British approval. While the Sultanate continued to exist nominally, genuine sovereignty had ended on the morning of August 27, 1896. The administration was increasingly integrated into the broader British East African colonial structure. This protectorate status persisted for many decades. Zanzibar eventually gained independence from Britain on December 10, 1963, over 67 years after the shortest war in history concluded. The events of that single morning in 1896 left a lasting mark. They irrevocably altered the political trajectory of Zanzibar, subordinating it to British imperial interests until the mid-20th century. Reconstruction efforts began on the Sultan's palace complex, though parts remained damaged for years. The new Sultan Hamid did not fully occupy the structure in the same manner as his predecessors. Within Zanzibar, the brief, violent conflict left a deep impression. The overwhelming power displayed by the Royal Navy served as a constant, unspoken deterrent against future challenges to British authority. The loss of approximately 500 lives on the Zanzibari side, compared to a single minor British injury, starkly illustrated the technological disparity. It was a heavy price for a resistance lasting less than 45 minutes. Subsequently, British officials assumed more direct administrative roles within the Zanzibari government. Local governance structures were increasingly supervised or replaced by personnel loyal to the protecting power. During this period, the economy of Zanzibar, heavily reliant on cloves and trade, continued under the established system but with British interests prioritized. Fiscal policies were closely overseen by British advisors. The abolition of slavery in 1897, while mandated by Sultan Hamid, was driven primarily by British anti-slavery sentiment and pressure. It fundamentally altered the socio-economic fabric of the islands, though the transition faced challenges. The memory of the Anglo-Zanzibar War persisted locally, often recounted as a moment of sudden, catastrophic change. It symbolized the end of an era of relative independence and the imposition of colonial rule. Ultimately, the events of August 27, 1896, cemented the war's place in history not just for its unparalleled brevity, but as a clear example of gunboat diplomacy and the realities of European imperial expansion in Africa.